The phone rang at 2:15 in the morning, its shrill, urgent sound slicing through the stillness of the house. Aaron didn't want to answer. His hand hovered above the receiver for a long moment, heart pounding in his chest, his mind numb with exhaustion. He had expected this moment. He'd known it would come, but he still wasn't ready. After months of sleepless nights and watching his wife, Emily, deteriorate in front of him, the time had finally arrived. For weeks, the doctors had told him it was coming. They had used words like terminal, hopeless, and deterioration. Emily's illness was a rare, almost mythical disease that had no cure. It had stolen her strength, her vitality, and now, it was taking her life. But despite all the warnings, Aaron couldn't seem to fully grasp it. And now, this phone call, a cold reminder of what he had tried to ignore. He picked up the phone. The number was from the hospital, and the voice on the other end of the line was as clinical as it was inevitable. "Mr. Collins?" The voice was clear, authoritative, yet strangely detached. "This is Dr. Miller. I'm calling to inform you that Emily's condition has worsened. She is no longer responding. You should come to the hospital immediately." Aaron didn't need to hear any more. He had known this was coming. The end was near, and all he had to do now was show up, say goodbye, and let it be over. He could already feel the weight of his future lifting as he thought about it, the inheritance, the freedom, the life that awaited him once Emily was gone. "I'll be there in a minute," he said, his voice hollow, flat with the exhaustion of what he had been through. His fingers trembled slightly as he set the phone down. He stood there for a moment, staring blankly at the receiver, his thoughts swirling in an endless loop. Was he doing the right thing? He'd been asking himself that for weeks, maybe months. But it had become clear, he couldn't keep watching Emily suffer. And deep down, he had always known the truth. Emily had become a stranger to him. She wasn't the woman he had married. She had been vibrant, full of life, and now, she was a ghost, clinging to life in a way that drained him, both emotionally and physically. The disease had changed everything. It had stolen her from him long before it took her life. In those early days of her diagnosis, Aaron had tried. He had tried to be the loving husband, sitting beside her in the sterile hospital rooms, pretending to care. But it wasn't real. The love he once felt for Emily had eroded away slowly, a gradual disintegration of a marriage that had been built on the illusion of happiness. The inheritance had been the only thing that kept him going. The family money, Emily's family's wealth, had always been a distant thought in the back of his mind. But now, as the disease stole more of her away, he could see the finish line. The day would come when Emily would die, and with it, the promise of the money that had been promised to him in return for his loyalty. That thought made it easier. It made everything easier. Aaron drove to the hospital in silence. The streets were empty, and the air was thick with the kind of damp cold that only a city in the middle of the night could offer. His car was a sleek, black sedan, a gift from Emily's family years ago. But tonight, the car felt heavier, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. As he parked the car outside the hospital, he found himself staring at the darkened building. He had spent so much time pretending everything was fine. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. His thoughts began to race. Was he a bad person? Did he really care about Emily? No. It was too late for that. It had been too late for a long time. The moment the doctors had given him the diagnosis, he had started pulling away. He had stopped trying to comfort her, stopped holding her hand. He had stopped pretending. He needed the money. He needed the life that had been promised to him. The hospital lobby was quiet as Aaron walked in, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the polished floors. The nurse behind the desk looked up and gave him a tired, polite smile. "You're here for Mrs. Collins?" she asked. Aaron nodded. His throat was tight, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something: doubt? Guilt? Whatever it wasn't enough to make him turn back. Not yet. "She's in room 315, the nurse said, her voice calm and soothing in a way that felt almost unnatural. "She's still unconscious, but you can sit with her for a while." "Thanks," Aaron muttered, barely acknowledging her. He turned down the hallway, his footsteps quickening as he approached Emily's room. He had been here so many times over the last few months, and every time, it felt like a little piece of him died. The sterile, white walls and the soft beeping of the machines, the whole place made him feel suffocated. When he reached room 315, he paused at the door. Emily was inside, as lifeless as she had been for weeks. Her once beautiful face was gaunt and pale, her skin almost translucent. Her hair, once thick and glossy, now lay limp around her face like a tangled mess of straw. The sight of her filled him with a cold emptiness, and yet, a part of him felt relieved. The end was near. It was almost over. He opened the door quietly and stepped inside, not bothering to close it behind him. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight against the morning sun. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room, slow and steady, like a countdown. For a long time, Aaron just stood there, staring at Emily. She hadn't moved in days, not since she had slipped into unconsciousness. He wasn't sure if she could even hear him, but he spoke anyway. "Emily," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly despite his efforts to keep it steady. "I'm here." Her eyelids flickered. Aaron froze, his heart skipping a beat. For a moment, it seemed as if she might respond, but then her eyelids closed again, and her hand fell limply to the side. The disappointment hit him harder than he expected. He had wanted her to wake up, to say something, to give him one last reason to stay. But she didn't. She just lay there, still and silent. He moved to the chair beside her bed and sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to do this anymore. But what choice did he have? The inheritance was right there, within his grasp. If he just stayed the course a little longer, it would all be his. And yet, there was this nagging thought in the back of his mind. Was it wrong to feel nothing? Was it wrong to feel relieved that the end was finally here? "Emily," he said again, this time louder. "You can't hold on forever. You have to let go." Her breathing was shallow, slow, and labored. "Just let go," he muttered to himself, as much as to her. He sat there for hours. Time blurred, and everything seemed distant, like he was watching his life unfold from a distance. He didn't feel the anger or the pain he had expected. Instead, he felt numb. There was no joy in his relief, no excitement in the money that awaited him. Just an overwhelming, oppressive weight that kept him anchored to this moment. It wasn't until the nurse came in to check on Emily that Aaron was forced to move. "Mr. Collins," she said gently, not meeting his eyes. "She's slipping." "What do you mean, slipping?" he asked, his voice rising a little, as if the words might change something. The nurse's face softened. "Her vitals are dropping. It won't be long now." Aaron's throat tightened. He didn't know how to feel. Everything inside him screamed for him to run, to escape, to find the life that he had dreamed of. But instead, he just nodded. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He had made his choice. As the nurse left the room, Aaron found himself standing beside Emily's bed again, staring at her frail form. She hadn't been the woman he married for a long time. But now, even in her death, she was the one who held all the power. And with one last breath, she would give him everything he had ever wanted. The inheritance was waiting. But so was the price. And Aaron didn't know if he was ready to pay it. The hospital room felt colder now that Emily had stopped breathing. The sterile, lifeless air seemed to press down on Aaron, suffocating him in its weight. The heart monitor had flatlined some minutes ago, but Aaron didn't need to hear the mechanical beeping to know that Emily was gone. He had seen it coming for weeks, months even, but still, when the moment came, it felt unreal. The finality of it hung in the air, thick and heavy, like an anchor that couldn't be shaken. Aaron sat there, unmoving, his gaze fixed on his wife's pale face. She was still. So still, that the quietude of the room seemed to deepen. Outside, the first rays of dawn were starting to pierce through the cracks in the window, spilling faint light onto the sterile white walls. It was the beginning of a new day, one in which Aaron's life was supposed to change. But instead of feeling relief or hope, a strange emptiness filled him. He wasn't sure how long he had been sitting there when the door creaked open. A nurse entered, her soft footsteps almost drowned out by the silence. She moved toward Emily's bed, looking down at her lifeless form with a practiced, clinical gaze. She wasn't surprised. It was clear from the way she moved that death had come as no shock to anyone involved in Emily's care. "I'm so sorry," the nurse murmured, but Aaron could barely hear her. His mind was racing, spiraling out of control, and he couldn't focus on the nurse or what she was saying. His thoughts were elsewhere. The inheritance. The wealth Emily's family had promised him if he stayed by her side. It had been a cold and calculating deal from the start, and now, it was time to collect. He had made it through the worst. His years of pretending, of feigning concern, of putting up with the disease, were over. He was free now. But as he stood to leave, something stopped him. A sudden, unsettling feeling gnawed at the pit of his stomach, and his steps faltered. His hand brushed against the doorframe as he exited, his fingers lingering there for just a moment longer than necessary. The fleeting sensation of doubt passed quickly, but it left a bitter taste behind. Aaron couldn't explain it. He had never truly loved Emily, not for years. But as he turned his back on her for the final time, it felt wrong. The kind of wrong that lingered just beneath the surface. He pushed it aside, reminding himself of what waited for him. He stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights above humming faintly. The cool air of the hospital seemed to seep into his skin, numbing him even further. The inheritance. Aaron thought about the mansion, the sprawling estate in the countryside that he would soon be able to call his own. The accounts that would be his, the luxuries he would finally enjoy. All of it was within his grasp. Just a few more formalities and it would all be his. He was entitled to it. He had earned it. But the weight of it, the sheer magnitude of his future, felt like a burden now. It was a prize won at too high a cost. Aaron's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his reverie. He fished it out, his eyes immediately scanning the screen. It was a message from the family lawyer, Mr. Wright, Emily's family's trusted legal representative. Aaron had known him for years, but their conversations had always been formal, distant. This message was different. The reading of the will take place at 2 p.m. today. Please be present at the Collins estate. It is imperative you arrive on time. There are matters that require your immediate attention. Aaron stared at the message for a long time. It felt like an odd formality, like he had to be there, as if the lawyer were reminding him that this was a business transaction, not a matter of emotion. Still, a strange sense of urgency tugged at him. He had expected to wait longer, perhaps a few days or even a week. But today? It was as if Emily's family couldn't wait to hand over the wealth, as if they had been anticipating this moment for a long time. The drive to the Collins estate was a blur. The familiar roads passed by in a haze, but Aaron's mind was far from the journey. He was preparing for what was to come, the reading of the will, the exchange that would seal his fate. He could already see it in his mind, the lawyer handing him a piece of paper, shaking his hand, and congratulating him on his inheritance. But there was something in the back of his mind, something that told him it wouldn't be as simple as that. The mansion came into view, sitting high on the hill, bathed in the glow of the afternoon sun. It was a grand, imposing structure, a symbol of old money and tradition. Aaron had always felt out of place here, even though he had lived here for short periods over the years. The wealth was almost oppressive in its grandeur, a reminder of how much he had changed since his marriage to Emily. As Aaron pulled into the driveway, he caught sight of the few other cars already parked outside. He recognized them immediately, the familiar faces of Emily's relatives, some of whom he hadn't seen in years. The tension in the air was palpable as he stepped out of his car and made his way to the front door. The heavy oak door creaked open as he approached, and Mr. Wright, the family lawyer, greeted him with a stiff smile. "Mr. Collins," he said with a nod. "I'm glad you could make it. Please, come in. The others are already gathered inside." Aaron followed the lawyer down the marble hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The house felt colder now, despite the warmth of the sun outside. It felt empty, as though the walls were holding their breath, waiting for something. Inside the formal sitting room, the other members of Emily's family were already seated. There was her brother, Richard, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a permanent scowl on his face. His wife, Linda, sat next to him, her eyes sharp and calculating. Across from them sat Emily's elderly aunt, Marlene, a frail woman whose sharp features were softened by the years. They all looked at Aaron as he entered, but no one spoke. The silence was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Wright asked, his voice cutting through the tension. He gestured toward a chair at the head of the room, indicating that Aaron should take a seat. Aaron hesitated for just a moment before sitting down. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but this was not it. The air was thick with anticipation, as though the family was waiting for something. "What?" Mr. Wright took a seat across from Aaron, his briefcase open on the table between them. He shuffled through a few papers, then looked up at the family. "As you know, the will of the late Mrs. Emily Collins is to be read today. I trust that everyone is prepared." His eyes flicked briefly to Aaron, then back to the others. "This will be brief. The legalities have already been sorted out. However, there is one matter that must be addressed." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. The air seemed to thicken, the tension palpable. What did the lawyer mean? He had expected this to be a simple process. He had expected the money to come to him without any obstacles. The lawyer continued, his voice steady. "I will read the relevant portions of the will now." He cleared his throat and began. "To my brother Richard, I leave my collection of antique watches, as per our agreement. To my dear Aunt Marlene, I leave my jewelry collection. To my loyal husband Aaron, I leave my personal assets, including but not limited to the estate, savings accounts, and investments. However, there is one final stipulation." Mr. Wright looked up, his eyes locking with Aaron's. "Aaron, I am afraid you will have to meet one condition before this inheritance becomes yours." A chill ran down Aaron's spine. "What condition?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The lawyer's lips curled into a faint smile, and the room seemed to grow even colder. "You must prove your loyalty to Emily. There is a test that must be completed before the inheritance is finalized. The full details of this test will be disclosed at a later time." Aaron felt his stomach twist. What kind of test? He hadn't signed up for this. He had already played his part. He had stayed by Emily's side, pretending to care, and now he was supposed to prove his loyalty? It didn't make sense. It felt like a cruel joke. Is this some kind of game? Richard's voice broke the silence, a sneer on his face. Mr. Wright didn't answer directly. Instead, he opened a folder and pulled out a letter, sliding it across the table to Aaron. "This letter will explain everything. You will have 48 hours to comply. Failure to do so will result in the forfeiture of the inheritance." Aaron's mind raced as he reached for the letter, his hands shaking slightly. What kind of test was this? Why was this being done now, after everything was supposedly settled? The weight of the letter felt like a stone in his hands, the mystery surrounding it gnawing at him. He looked up at Mr. Wright, his voice trembling with disbelief. "This isn't what we agreed on," he said, though the words felt hollow. The lawyer simply smiled, his eyes cold. "I'm afraid the agreement has changed, Mr. Collins. You'll have to play by new rules." As the family looked on in silence, Aaron realized something. He wasn't just fighting for money anymore. He was fighting for something far more elusive. And this test, it wasn't going to be easy. Aaron sat in the sprawling, cold living room of the Collins estate, the letter Mr. Wright had given him still clenched tightly in his hands. His fingers gripped the edges, feeling the paper's texture, as if the physical sensation could somehow ground him in this surreal moment. His mind raced as he read the letter for the 5th time, but the words on the page still didn't make sense. To Aaron Collins. As per the terms of Emily's inheritance, there is a condition that you must meet before you can receive the full assets bequeathed to you. This test is designed to assess your commitment to the family and to Emily. Failure to complete it successfully will result in the forfeiture of the inheritance. The test will begin within the next 48 hours. You will be given a series of instructions that you must follow precisely. Any deviation will be seen as an act of disloyalty, and the consequence will be immediate disqualification. You are expected to comply without hesitation, for this is your final opportunity to prove that you were worthy of the trust Emily's family placed in you. Respectfully, Mr. Wright, family lawyer, *. Aaron's stomach churned as he read through the letter again. The same words, the same meaning, but it didn't make any more sense. He had been prepared to take the inheritance. He had been prepared to move on with his life, to live freely without the weight of Emily's illness on his shoulders. But now, he was trapped in a game he hadn't agreed to play. A game where the rules were unknown, where everything he thought he knew was suddenly uncertain. He looked up at the lawyer, still sitting across from him, his face a picture of calm professionalism. The others in the room, Emily's relatives, had remained silent throughout the exchange, but their eyes never left him, as if waiting for him to explode, to demand answers, or maybe even beg. But Aaron had no time for that. His mind was too busy piecing together what this test could be, what it would entail. "You knew about this?" Aaron's voice was tight, barely above a whisper. Mr. Wright's expression didn't change. He folded his hands on the table and met Aaron's gaze. "Of course. We've been preparing for this eventuality for some time now." Aaron's fists clenched at his sides. He stopped himself. He didn't want to say anything he might regret. He needed to think, to plan. There was no time for anger. "The test will be in your hands soon," the lawyer said, his tone unyielding. "I suggest you follow the instructions carefully. We'll be watching, Mr. Collins." Aaron's throat tightened. "Why now? Why is this happening? I've been here for years, I've taken care of Emily. I've done everything you asked." "There are things, Mr. Collins, that you don't know about," Mr. Wright said coolly. "And now, you have to prove your loyalty, not just to Emily, but to this family." With that, the lawyer stood up, his expression impassive as he motioned for the others to rise. Aaron stayed seated, staring at the letter in his hands, the weight of it pressing down on him more than any of the family's cold stares ever could. It was an hour later when the first part of the test arrived. Aaron had been pacing in the Collins estate sitting room, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. His fingers tapped nervously on the arm of the chair as he glanced at the clock. 3 p.m. The letter had promised that the test would begin within 48 hours, but he hadn't expected it to be so immediate. The doorbell rang. The sound reverberated through the house like a warning. Aaron froze, his breath caught in his throat. He hadn't been expecting anyone. Not now. He opened the door cautiously, and there stood a man he didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. The man had a strange, almost unapproachable air about him, and his eyes held a sharpness that made Aaron uncomfortable. "I'm here for Mr. Collins," the man said, his voice low, deliberate. "That's me," Aaron replied, stepping aside to let him in. Without another word, the man stepped into the foyer, scanning the large space with a practiced gaze before he turned to Aaron. He didn't introduce himself or offer any pleasantries. He simply handed Aaron a thick envelope, sealed with red wax. "Open it," the man instructed flatly. Aaron hesitated. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. He tore open the envelope, his hands trembling slightly, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He read the message, his mind immediately beginning to race. "Aaron. The first test begins now. You must go to the old family estate at the outskirts of town. There, you will find a safe hidden beneath the floorboards of the library. The combination to the safe is your first test. You will need to retrieve the contents and return them here within the hour. Failure to do so will result in the forfeiture of your inheritance. You will know when the time is right. Trust no one but yourself. Good luck. Mr. Wright, **. The words were chilling, but what struck Aaron more than the contents of the letter was the urgency. He had less than an hour to complete this first task, and there were no instructions beyond that. No hint as to what he might find in the safe, no warning of what might lie ahead. The ambiguity of it all gnawed at him. The man standing before him didn't say anything else, he simply turned and walked toward the door, leaving Aaron alone with the letter and the weight of the task ahead of him. Aaron wasted no time. He grabbed his coat and left the mansion, the cool air biting at his skin as he made his way to his car. His thoughts were in turmoil. What was this all about? Why this test? Why the secrecy? As he drove, the streets blurred past him, the usual familiarity of the town now shrouded in a haze of tension. The old family estate was a few miles outside of town, perched on the edge of the woods, its dark silhouette visible against the evening sky. He had been there only once or twice, on rare visits during the early years of his marriage to Emily. It was a decaying, ominous place, long abandoned, but it had always been part of the Collins legacy. He knew the exact spot, the library where the safe was supposed to be. The floorboards there had always been creaky, even when they were new. The thought of having to search through that dusty old house made him uneasy, but there was no time to hesitate. He needed to complete this test, no matter what it took. When he arrived at the estate, the large stone gates creaked open, and he parked in front of the sprawling, crumbling mansion. The house looked even more imposing in the dark, its windows like hollow eyes staring into the night. He stepped out of the car and approached the front door. The key had been left in a small hiding spot, just as the letter had said. He unlocked the door and entered the dark, musty house, the familiar scent of mold and decay filling the air. The library was located to the left, and Aaron quickly made his way inside. It was as cold as he remembered, the shelves towering over him, filled with old books covered in dust. He moved through the room, his heart pounding in his chest as he searched the floorboards. It didn't take long to find the spot, a small section of the floor that seemed different from the rest, slightly raised. He pried it open, revealing the hidden safe beneath. His hands shook as he twisted the dial. The combination was unknown to him. But then a thought struck him, a thought so simple that it almost seemed too easy. He turned the dial, each click of the lock feeling like a heartbeat in the silence of the room. When the safe finally opened, Aaron felt a rush of adrenaline. Inside, there was a single object, an old, ornate box. It was small but heavy, and it seemed completely out of place in the dusty old safe. With trembling hands, Aaron lifted the box from its hiding spot and closed the safe. He couldn't help but feel that he was on the verge of something far greater than just wealth. This was more than an inheritance. This was a test of everything. Of trust, loyalty, and maybe even his own morality. He didn't know what was inside the box, but he knew it was just the beginning. The weight of the box in Aaron's hands felt heavier with every step he took back toward his car. The world outside the crumbling estate seemed distant, almost unreal. The wind howled, shaking the bare branches of the trees, but Aaron's mind was consumed by the object in his hands. What could possibly be inside? A piece of jewelry? Some document that would seal his fate? Or was it something far more dangerous, something that would make him wish he had never agreed to this game? As he reached his car, Aaron's hand trembled as he unlocked the door. The box sat on the passenger seat, still wrapped in mystery, its dark wooden exterior smooth but cold to the touch. He hesitated before climbing into the driver's seat, his thoughts spiraling out of control. What if the test had already begun? What if this box was a warning, something to push him to the edge of his sanity? The drive back to the mansion was a blur. His eyes were fixed on the road, but his thoughts weren't. They were tangled in the mystery surrounding this inheritance, this twisted test. He hadn't expected any of it to be easy, but this? This felt different. There was something sinister in the air, something he couldn't put his finger on. The urgency, the secrecy, it was all so deliberate. When he arrived back at the Collins estate, the mansion loomed large in the dark, its windows like empty eyes watching him. The front door was open, but the house felt colder now. More empty. The silence inside was deafening. He moved through the hallway, past the grand staircase, and into the sitting room, where he had last met Mr. Wright. The family was still there, sitting in the same positions they had been in earlier, Richard and his wife, Linda, staring blankly ahead, Aunt Marlene perched on the edge of her chair, her gnarled hands folded in her lap. Aaron didn't acknowledge them as he walked past, his eyes locked on Mr. Wright, who stood by the fireplace, his back to the room. "You've returned," the lawyer said, his voice as cold as the room itself. "I trust you completed the task." Aaron didn't answer immediately. He set the box down on the table in front of Mr. Wright, his hands shaking as he slid it toward him. The room seemed to hold its breath as the lawyer leaned forward, his gaze intense as he looked at the box. "Well done," Mr. Wright said, his voice steady. "But this is only the beginning, Aaron. The test is far from over." Aaron's heart sank. He had hoped, no, he had assumed, that this would be the end of it. That by completing the first task, the inheritance would be his. But instead, he felt like he was falling deeper into some twisted labyrinth with no way out. Mr. Wright's cold eyes met Aaron's, and for the first time, Aaron saw something other than calm calculation. There was something else, something almost sinister hiding beneath the surface. "The contents of this box will lead you to the next phase of the test," the lawyer said, a strange smile playing on his lips. "But I'm afraid you will need to do more than simply retrieve it. You will need to prove you are worthy of what it contains." Aaron's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Just open it." "I've done what you asked." Mr. Wright didn't move to open the box. Instead, he stood and motioned for Aaron to sit. The tension in the room was thick, and Aaron felt the cold weight of it settle on his chest. "There's a part of this that you don't understand yet," the lawyer said, his voice low. "You're not just proving your loyalty to Emily or to her family. You're proving your worth as a man, as someone who can be trusted with power. There's a reason why Emily's family chose you." Aaron's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Mr. Wright didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped to the side and pulled open a drawer in the wooden cabinet behind him. He retrieved a small, silver key and placed it on the table beside the box. The key glinted under the dim light, casting eerie reflections across the dark wood. "Take the key," Mr. Wright instructed. "It's part of the puzzle. And it's the only way forward." Aaron stared at the key, his thoughts racing. "What puzzle? I don't want any more games. I've played along with this farce long enough. I just want what's mine. I want the inheritance." "The inheritance is more than money, Aaron. It's more than wealth and power. It's a legacy," Mr. Wright said, his voice growing colder. "You will need to prove you understand that. Prove that you are capable of upholding it." Aaron's mind spun. He didn't understand any of this. But the lawyer's words had planted a seed of doubt deep within him. What did he mean by legacy? What exactly was in that box? What did it mean for his future? He grabbed the key, almost as if he were on autopilot. His fingers trembled around it as he looked down at the box. He had no choice but to follow the instructions. If he didn't, the inheritance, and everything he had worked for, would slip through his fingers. But as he stood there, holding the key, another thought struck him. What if Emily had known about all of this? What if she had left him this test on purpose, knowing it would push him to the edge? What if this whole thing had been her plan all along? It was a bitter thought, but it made sense. Emily's family had always been shrouded in mystery, their wealth guarded by layers of secrecy. Was this really about loyalty, or was it about something far more sinister? Aaron's hands shook as he inserted the key into the lock of the box. The click sounded loud in the silence of the room, and for a moment, he felt like he was holding his breath. The box opened slowly, its contents hidden from view. Aaron hesitated, a part of him reluctant to see what was inside, but another part urged him to act quickly. He lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a small book, old, worn, and bound in leather. The pages seemed yellowed with age, the cover cracked in places. It looked like an ancient journal, something that belonged in a museum, not in the hands of a modern man. Aaron's heart raced as he lifted the book from the box. The weight of it felt strange in his hands, like it carried centuries of history. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise, but the words were cryptic, like a code waiting to be deciphered. To those who seek power, remember that all things come at a price. The legacy of the Collins family is built on sacrifice, not just wealth. The true test of worth is not in the riches you acquire, but in the burdens you are willing to bear. Follow the clues carefully, for they will lead you to your true inheritance. Do not stray from the path, or all is lost. The word sent a shiver down Aaron's spine. Sacrifice? Burdens? What did this mean? He turned the page, his breath catching in his throat. The next page was covered in a strange, intricate pattern, symbols and runes that he didn't recognize. It wasn't just a journal. It was a map of some kind, a guide to something deeper, something darker than he had ever anticipated. The book wasn't just about money. It was about power. And it seemed that to claim what was rightfully his, he would need to navigate a twisted maze of secrets, codes, and tests that would push him to the brink of his very humanity. He had no choice. The inheritance was within his reach. But it wasn't just about money anymore, it was about something far greater. Something he couldn't even begin to comprehend. As he looked up from the book, his gaze met Mr. Wright's once more. The lawyer was watching him intently, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Well done, Aaron. You've passed the first test. But the journey is just beginning. Aaron's breath caught in his throat as he felt the full weight of the situation crash down on him. The test had only just begun. And he was in way over his head. Aaron could feel the weight of the leather-bound journal in his hands, as though it had grown heavier with each passing second. The eerie, cryptic words from the book echoed in his mind, repeating over and over like a mantra, the true test of worth is not in the riches you acquire, but in the burdens you are willing to bear. The phrase had haunted him since he'd opened the book, and now it seemed to take on a deeper meaning as he sat in the cold, dimly lit room of the Collins estate. He stared down at the strange symbols etched into the pages, unable to make sense of them. The runes were like nothing he had ever seen before, ancient and foreign, an enigma hidden beneath layers of mystery. The book wasn't just a journal. It was a map. But a map to what? What was this legacy that Emily's family had left behind? And why had they chosen him, someone who had no connection to their world, to carry the burden of this legacy? His thoughts swirled as he looked up at Mr. Wright, who had been watching him silently since he'd opened the book. The lawyer stood with his arms folded, his face impassive, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, betrayed something else: anticipation. Aaron's gut twisted. The man had been playing this game all along. The inheritance wasn't about money, wasn't about freedom from Emily's illness. It was a test, one with stakes higher than he could have ever imagined. "You must follow the map," Mr. Wright said, his voice cold but carrying an almost predatory edge. "The instructions are clear. The next step in the process awaits. But I must warn you, Aaron, not everyone is capable of carrying this burden." The lawyer's words seemed like a challenge, like a warning. Aaron's hands tightened around the book. He was tired of being a pawn in this game. Tired of feeling like he was caught in a trap that was only tightening with every move he made. But he had no choice. If he wanted the inheritance, if he wanted to prove that he was worthy of it, of Emily's trust, of the life they had once shared, he would have to follow the rules, no matter how twisted they seemed. "I'll follow the map," Aaron said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Tell me what to do next." Mr. Wright's eyes flickered with something like satisfaction. He nodded once. "I knew you would. The map leads to a hidden location, one that has been kept secret for generations. It's a place that only the Collins family knows about, only those who are worthy can find it. You'll need to go to the location specified in the book, but be warned, time is not on your side." Aaron frowned. "Time? What are you talking about?" "The test is not just about your resolve, Aaron. It's about your ability to follow through under pressure. There is only so much time before the inheritance is forfeited, and if you don't reach the destination in time, you'll lose everything." Aaron's chest tightened. The stakes were rising with every word Mr. Wright spoke. He could feel the tension thickening the air, and the weight of the inheritance, now so much more than just money, settled on his shoulders. What was he walking into? What was this place the book referred to? And why had Emily's family chosen him to uncover their darkest secrets? He had to find out. For Emily. For himself. The next phase of the test. Aaron spent the next hour obsessively studying the journal, tracing his fingers over the symbols, trying to unlock their meaning. But the more he stared at the pages, the more they seemed to taunt him, slipping just out of reach. The runes were complex, almost like an ancient code, but Aaron wasn't a scholar of history or linguistics. He had no idea how to decipher them. He stood up abruptly, frustration coursing through him. He needed to figure this out. He couldn't afford to fail. A soft knock on the door broke his concentration. He turned, startled. It was the maid, Marie, one of the few people Aaron trusted in the estate. She had been with the family for years, long before Aaron's arrival. Marie had always been kind to him, and there was something about her gentle demeanor that gave him a sense of calm. "Mr. Collins," she said softly, stepping into the room. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see. A letter just arrived for you. It's marked with the Collins family seal." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. A letter from the Collins family? After everything that had already happened, he wasn't sure he could handle another twist. But he knew he had to see it. He took the letter from Marie, his hands shaking as he broke the seal. Inside, he found a single sheet of paper, the writing scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic hand. It read, "Aaron. The time is almost upon you. You will soon face the final test of the inheritance, but first, you must understand the truth about the Collins legacy. The place you seek is real, but it is not simply a location, it is a symbol. It represents everything we have built, everything we have sacrificed to preserve this family's legacy. Your journey is about more than wealth. It is about power, responsibility, and the choices you make. Find the place. If you succeed, you will claim your birthright. If you fail, you will lose everything. Be careful, Aaron. There are those who would stop you from claiming what is rightfully yours. The clock is ticking. Mr. Wright, **. The letter's words sent a shiver down Aaron's spine. The place was real. But what did that mean? What was it that the Collins family had built? And who were these mysterious figures that might stop him? His heart raced as the weight of the decision settled on him. The test wasn't just about proving his loyalty anymore, it was about uncovering the deepest secrets of Emily's family and claiming a legacy that was as dark and twisted as the history they had hidden. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. The journey to the unknown. Aaron knew what he had to do next. The letter had given him the final push he needed to understand the importance of the map and the symbols. It was time to act. He grabbed the journal and headed out the door, Marie watching him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. But Aaron didn't have time to explain. He had to find the place, and he had to find it now. The drive to the location the map had described was long and winding, taking him farther out into the countryside, past familiar streets, until everything around him felt unfamiliar. As he drove, his thoughts churned. The letter had mentioned power and responsibility. What did it mean? Was he truly ready for this? What would he find at the end of this journey? His grip on the wheel tightened as the landscape grew darker. The sun was beginning to set, casting an eerie, orange glow over the horizon. The further he drove, the more he felt the weight of the Collins family legacy pressing down on him, like an unseen force pulling him toward an inevitable fate. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Aaron arrived at a small clearing in the woods. The trees towered above him, casting long shadows across the ground. In the center of the clearing stood an old, crumbling stone structure, an ancient ruin, half buried beneath the overgrowth. This was it. The place the journal had described. He parked the car and stepped out, the cool air biting at his skin. He felt the weight of the journal in his hands again as he walked toward the ruin. Every step he took seemed to echo through the silence of the woods, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. When he reached the ruin, he noticed something strange. The stones had been arranged in a pattern, an intricate design that seemed to mirror the symbols in the journal. He studied the arrangement closely, his heart racing as he realized that the symbols weren't just part of a code, they were instructions, guiding him to the heart of the place. But as Aaron began to trace the symbols with his fingers, something else happened. A sudden chill swept through the air, and the ground beneath him seemed to shift. The stones groaned, almost as if they were alive, as the earth seemed to react to his touch. Before he could comprehend what was happening, the ground gave way beneath his feet. The earth gave way beneath Aaron's feet, and he barely had time to react before he plunged into darkness. For a brief moment, his body twisted in midair, and then everything went still. His heart hammered in his chest as he hit the ground, a thud that seemed to rattle his bones. Pain shot up his legs, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stay conscious. The air was thick, and the ground beneath him felt damp and uneven. He blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness around him. Slowly, his eyes began to make out the faint outlines of the stone walls that surrounded him. It was as if he had fallen into a hidden underground chamber, a secret place buried deep beneath the forest floor. He pushed himself to his feet, groaning as the pain in his legs reminded him that he wasn't invincible. His breath came in ragged gasps as he took in his surroundings. The air was stale, and the only light came from the faint glow of phosphorescent moss growing on the walls. The place felt ancient, like it had been forgotten by time itself. Aaron reached for the journal, which had miraculously remained in his hand during the fall. His fingers trembled as he opened it, flipping through the pages until he found the last of the strange symbols. The map, the runes, they all led here. But what was here? And why? A distant sound echoed in the darkness, a faint scraping noise that made his skin crawl. He froze, listening intently. The sound was coming from somewhere deeper within the chamber, further down the winding corridors that stretched before him. It was impossible to tell if it was an animal, the wind, or something else. But something told him it wasn't a coincidence. It was as if he had just triggered something, a mechanism, a response to his presence. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, Aaron stepped forward, the journal held tightly against his chest. Every step he took echoed through the chamber, the silence pressing in on him from all sides. He could feel the weight of the place, the pressure of its history bearing down on him. This was not just a test anymore, it was something else entirely. A legacy that would shape the future. The air grew colder as he walked deeper into the stone corridors. The walls seemed to close in around him, the path growing narrower with each turn. It was as if the place itself was alive, breathing, watching him. His pulse quickened, the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. But he couldn't afford to falter. Not now. After what felt like an eternity, Aaron reached the heart of the underground structure, a large, circular chamber with a domed ceiling. The floor was covered in intricate carvings, symbols much like the ones in the journal. In the center of the room stood an enormous stone pedestal, its surface covered in dust and grime. The sound he had been hearing grew louder now, a scraping, scuttling noise that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned toward it, his breath catching in his throat. From the shadows emerged a figure. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, its face obscured by a hood. The figure moved with an unsettling grace, as though it were not bound by the same rules of the world Aaron had known. The scraping noise came from its hands, long and claw-like, dragging along the stone floor. "Who are you?" Aaron demanded, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to sound confident. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer, its hood still hiding its face. Aaron's heartbeat thudded in his chest as the figure stopped just a few feet away from him. The air seemed to shift, and for a moment, Aaron felt like he was being pulled into another world entirely, a world where nothing made sense, where every rule he had known about reality was upended. He had stepped into the heart of the Collins legacy, and now, it seemed, the legacy had a mind of its own. "You've come for the inheritance," the figure spoke, its voice low and raspy, echoing off the stone walls. "But what will you do with it once you have it?" Aaron swallowed hard. I don't understand. What is this place? What am I supposed to do?" The figure slowly lifted a hand, and Aaron's gaze followed it, instinctively watching as the figure placed it on the stone pedestal in the center of the room. A strange, eerie light began to glow from the pedestal, illuminating the chamber with an unnatural glow. "This place," the figure said, "is not just a test of your worth. It is a test of your character. The inheritance is not merely power. It is a burden. A responsibility. The choices you make here will decide whether you are worthy of the legacy, or whether the legacy will destroy you." Aaron stared at the pedestal, his mind racing. Burden. Responsibility. These were words he had heard before, but now, they held weight. He had been chasing after the inheritance without understanding what it really meant. He had wanted it to free him from his past, to give him power over his future. But now, standing here in this strange, otherworldly place, he realized how little he knew about the true cost of that inheritance. The Collins family, the figure continued, has always been cursed by its legacy. Power without wisdom is poison. The inheritance you seek has claimed many before you, and it will claim many more if you are not careful. Aaron's heart pounded in his chest. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rising, desperation creeping in.